Welcome back to Third Culture Convos. I'm Waseem, your host for today's episode, and today I'm joined by Majid, and we're exploring another fascinating aspect of the Third Culture Kid experience. In today's episode, we're going to dive into the complex and often confusing world of tipping etiquette across different cultures. As Third Culture Kids, we've navigated the varying norms and expectations surrounding tipping, and we're excited to share some of our stories and insights with you. From the significance of gratuities to the unspoken rules governing tipping practices, we'll discuss challenges and amusing experiences we've encountered while adapting to different tipping cultures from around the globe. So let's just jump right in. Majid, I know you were very excited to have this discussion and to talk about tipping. And the world of tipping has changed a lot, and we've all had our experiences. So hit me.
Yeah, it's just there's been a rash of recent posts on Reddit related to DoorDash and Grubhub and these delivery companies, and it has to do with tipping. People are very confused with how much are they supposed to tip the driver? How much are they supposed to tip the driver? Why do they have to pay extra on top of the service charge? What's the service charge for?
And the
Where's the
service
tip?
charge has gone up, and the service charges have gone up. And so service charges have gone, tipping has gone up. In restaurant, you're talking about the driver, and so deliveries and Ubers, but also in restaurants. So when you go to restaurants, especially post-pandemic in North America, tipping went from, let's say, a range. And I remember when it wasn't this range. I remember when the range was like 10 to 15%. So I remember when I first came to North America, probably 20, or when I first had money in my pocket to tip, the tipping was 10 to 15%. And 15% was like, you people are incredible.
10% is the your good job. 15% is your excellent job.
Yes,
Exactly.
excellent. I'll be back again.
12% is if I'm feeling generous and I have some loose change.
Yeah, I'll be back. And then slowly I think it went up at some point and it became 15 to 20. And that was the range, the new range. And then post-pandemic, also on Reddit, it's 18 to 25 now. It's like something like 18, 25%. And a lot of the argument that is, so I'll go on Reddit and I'll look at a picture of a tip or expectation of a tip. And especially, I think what has also created more of the expectation of tipping in North American culture is when you put in, like you pay by tap or you pay using the machine. And so the machine then it's not just immediately just tap and go like you're in a grocery store. It'll be like, do you want to add a tip? And then it'll give you suggested amounts. And the suggested amounts were 10, 12, 15, then became, maybe the machines weren't around then. And then it became 15, 18, 20. And now it's 18, 20, 22, 23. And that number just starts to creep up. And in those arguments, you have a couple of things. On the one side, like on Reddit, you'll have people going, I'll hear it being like, you got to give these service workers a wage. They lost so much money over the pandemic. It sucked. This job sucks anyway. Everything sucks about everything. And like, you're an asshole for not giving them a higher and higher tip. And then on the other side, it's, man, isn't it the employer's job to figure that shit out? Isn't it that's not the customer's job to figure out how much to top up your salary. Your salary is not my business. I don't know how much you make. I don't know whether it's a lot or a little or enough. I don't know how many hours you work. Like, I'm not in a position to judge whether you've made enough today or not.
Like post-pandemic, there's also been restaurants that have openly said, hey, tip our people because we don't pay a fair living. We expect they need these tips to live, people, so please tip them really well. They're very open about it. And yeah, with the second person's argument that you just mentioned, the two people, the second person, there's also the statement of like, isn't that why we have a minimum wage? So that everyone knows that if they work a guaranteed minimum hours, 40 hours, they're going to make X amount of money. Like how in the restaurant industry, which is huge, especially in North America, takeout and lunches and work lunches and stuff. How is it that like this entire industry is not subject to labor laws and labor rights? Like, how
Oh,
did we miss that one?
yeah, because man, they're crazy corporations, right? Like they
I pay you $3 below the minimum wage because you'll make it up in tips
because you'll
eventually,
make it up in
inshallah.
tips. Yeah, yeah, and then but then also every employment like area, everything they got to figure out how they're gonna split the tips. So let's say like, what about the back staff? What about the kitchen staff? What about the cleaning staff? What about all these people that are on the same sort of pay grade as the servers, but the only people that are in a position to collect the tips or to push for higher tips, right? Would you tip more if the food was spectacular? Yes. Would you tip more if the food was spectacular, but the service was horrendous? I don't know. Prob Would you be more in a position to be like, "Oh, you know what? I'm going out. I'm tipping." And now we're not just talking about the tipping, that we're talking about the amount to tip. So I think there's multiple parts to this discussion. It's A, to tip or not to tip, because that's not standard operating procedure all over the world.
Because Europeans, Germans especially, are very off put when they visit America. They're very put off by this concept of tipping. Apparently, in Germany, they don't tip like that. And so, like, they exactly the first question is even just to tip or not. Is it the employer's prerogative to get to have you as a working person, stable working person, or is
Yeah,
it the customer's? Is it coming out of the customer's wallet?
yeah. And I think there's a bunch of things here. So let's talk about the first part, which is to tip or not to tip. I remember when I was in Korea. In Korea, there's no tipping culture. So like you don't tip. And I remember going to a restaurant once with a friend, and we ate, and then we left a tip on the table. It was nice, lovely people. We left a tip on the table and we left the restaurant. And then I kid you not, 2 minutes later, the woman that served us chasing us down the street and said, "You forgot your money on the table." And we were like, "No, this is for you." And she said, "Oh, this is for you. I got paid. This is for you. I have money. I don't need this." Like the cost is in the service. It's done. We're good.
This is my job. Like, I don't
Yeah.
need extra.
And like the fact that she ran down the street, the fact that she gave it, and it's like, oh, like not only that, like it almost felt that we were insulting her by giving her a tip. And that blew my mind, right? Like it was the first time that I had been in a situation where and different. Like in the Middle East, there is a tipping culture. It's called like in the tikramu. Oh, in you gratitude. It might be the word like, but like you I
Spread the love.
yeah.
Spread
I
the
mean, sometimes before so that the person, like, knows that you tip. It's like when you go to a hotel and you tip the bellboy, like, right as soon as you get there because and you give them a nice big tip because then they'll take good care of you for the rest of the trip because, "Oh, yeah," yeah, and then when you're leaving, you give a nice big tip as well, and then, like, you set it up, and if you don't tip, you don't get the as nice of an experience, right? So, it's not every culture in the world, but in certain I remember just in Korea, it was like there was just no tipping. You didn't like it was and the further you left cities or like bigger restaurant, like where it wasn't like a big restaurant, that like the smaller, like family-owned places, you definitely didn't tip, which seems counterintuitive to what you would normally think that you would do, you know?
That is very counterintuitive to usual.
Yeah, like a
Like,
small family place would be like, "No, you don't tip us." Like that's rude.
that's cool. That's very good.
Yeah.
It's the same here in Pakistan. In general, in Pakistan, people don't tip, but that's more out of culturally that like they don't tip. So when I do give people money here, they're more than happy. They remember you because they're like, oh yeah, this is the guy who actually gives like tips.
Yeah, yeah. And so there is like a place this is interesting. When I'm putting myself in the as a service worker position. I'm in the service worker's position. Now what would I prefer? Would I prefer to have like a good wage and this is my job and this is my service job, whatever it is, if I have to carry things, if I have to like this, whatever I'm doing in service or hospitality or whatever. Would I prefer a job like with that hat? They gave me like a salary, like this is my salary, and I know how much I'm getting at the end of the month for the hours that I've worked, and that's that. Or do I prefer a a scale based on like multiple factors, half of which aren't in my hands, right? They're not. Yes, sure, I can provide better service. I can do that in both scenarios, right? In the other, it's not like if I don't have the incentive of a tip, I'm going to do a bad job. Like I don't necessarily think. I think they want you to believe that, right? Because then that makes it easy. But I think people will choose stability over not even like I'm having a bad day, but maybe this person can't afford the tip, or this person is, or this customer is from a culture that doesn't do tipping.
Can I be a service worker who understands the place of a customer and says, yeah, it's not the place of a customer to pay my salary. It's my boss's job to pay my
To
salary,
collect
right?
it, yeah, the person who's sitting at the collecting the money for this for the overall service that's being provided, which is if it's in a restaurant, it's the food. And like even in service industries, right? Like I think about the number of service industries that exist. Like you don't tip your doctor, you don't tip your nurse, except in Saudi sometimes like you would people tip the nurse. Like there are plenty of times where somebody will tip the nurse, even though I think as in terms of hospital policy it isn't allowed. But if a nurse is taking real good care of your father or your somebody in your family, people will be like, "Here's a tip, thank you," and
What you're calling a tip in this case is more of a gift.
yes,
I understand it's a technical, like linguistic difference, but it really is different. That's a gift versus a tip.
because it's I think it's coupled with lack of expectation. What makes it a gift is that there's a lack of expectation of it, and probably the whole issue with tips is the expectation associated with it. And so that there's an expectation that there's a tip, and so therefore you cannot gift. Therefore, you cannot gift good service. Be like, "Oh, here, you've been incredible." And even that person can say, "No, I got paid enough. It's cool." No, you don't really. I really don't need to. You can do that dance. You can do the dance for no, please, no, please take it. No, I don't want. Like, no, please just take it. No, I can't. I really can't. All right, fine. Here, and then as I put it in my pocket, I really can't do this. I really can't accept this. So yeah, it's a very nuanced type of thing, and it seems to me it's the expectation, and as the expectation goes up of, like, even what the tip requirement is, the more, let's say, the whole culture of tipping comes into question, comes into debate.
That's why I started with the app, is because the app is one of, I think, the most extreme cases of this tipping thing. Because it's crazy that there's companies out there that have they're functioning and they have investors and stuff, and they haven't figured out this major part of their business, like to tip or not to tip, or how to deal with drivers who want more tips and they're holding the food
Well,
hostage
and
and
what's
like
so funny with this particular thing, I think, as well, is that these big Uber companies, they're, like, huge, and they came under a lot of scrutiny for the fact that the workers were gig workers and not employed workers. So they get no benefits, and like how that comes into contrast with driving companies and taxi companies where like there may be benefits involved. There may be there are things, and maybe I don't know about with the taxi company, but there may be benefits. There's experience involved. And not just anybody with a car can just get the job. And and to remedy that, what the it's all sinister and genius at the same time. That instead of going, "You know what? We're gonna set up a program," which they may have. "We're gonna do this," which they may have, which they may have. They may have done all these things. What they did was they introduced the tipping feature, and then they kick the problem down the line so that it's your problem now. You're like, it's and whose problem is it? It's the work. the gig worker, and the customer. So it's no longer and because Uber's like, "Yo, I like, you're the ones not paying him, you asshole." It's the customers that don't. Like, "Look, I put it
I
on."
find this incredible that they
Yeah,
managed to just like you two fight it out and
you
we'll
figure it
collect
out.
our fees from both sides. Both of you
Yes.
just keep giving us money and you two keep fighting.
Yeah, the service fee is clear, so, like, that's coming to us, right? And so the rest of you guys figure it out. And if you really and I even heard if you I've heard this, man, from people, but and it pits people against each other because then people will be like, "If you're too lazy to pay if you're too cheap to pay a tip, then don't order Uber and go get the food yourself." And then you're like, "Huh? What? Like, how did that happen?"
I've just worked 6 days in a row. This is my one day off. I just wanted to sit at home and get some food. Why is this a like
Like
philosophical debate
now
between
now I'm responsible for the ails of the American workers, right? Like, I'm responsible for, tech companies letting everybody off, like, now I'm responsible for all this stuff? Like, me individually, personally, right?
like you're taking it out on me with my order. I'm trying to give you money, but you're still taking it out on me.
Yeah.
What to do here?
Yes.
And then, by the way, so there's the to tip or not to tip. But then there's this amount that you're absolutely right went from 8. 8 was like, I spit at you. I didn't like your service, but I'm still like in public, so I'm giving you something. 10 is your standard, like solid, decent service. 12 is your like above average. And then 15 was like exceptional. Those figures, 8, 10, 12, 15 has gone to 18,
It keeps going
20,
up.
22, 25,
Yeah.
or like 15, 18, 20, and 22, like somewhere there. Like it's just jumped over what? Like it's still the same service. You're not like, you haven't enhanced the service at all. You
Yeah.
haven't become more efficient or
Well,
anything. I'm getting the same product.
and I was also thinking other people in the service industry that don't get any tips. So, Rashid isn't here, but we have, like, flight attendants, right? And they like, I nev you don't tip the flight attendant, right? You don't and even having having a friend like Rashid, who is a flight attendant and who said explains, like, he only gets like, their payment structure works where they only get paid once the doors of the plane close. So, getting like, the 2 hours it takes to get to you the commute is on your time, and then you still can't get a you're still not, like, not in the line, let's say, or in consideration for tipping. I it's that doesn't seem fair. And that's probably where, mm, as a third culture kid who has experienced a bunch of tipping cultures from across the world, that's probably the whole problem with tipping, I find, like, the intellectual problem at the very least. Like, everybody loves to receive a tip. I like unless you're paid really well and you don't need a tip. And, like, it still might feel nice for you to get a token of gratitude. So tokens of gratitude, and that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about financial tips.
That's what token of gratitude for me is what I call gift
Yeah.
versus tip.
Yes. Versus tipped, where the expectation, but then it seems like there's a bunch of people in the service industries, in different aspects of a service industry where it's either hospitality or service or care, that aren't eligible for these tips and have just as much of a claim as a driver that delivers as and the reason why they like it's like tipping is like the crutch that in that industry, like let's say the restaurant industry and the delivery industry and the transportation, like the taxi driving industry. That's those industries. It's the crutch that allows them to make their profits. To like, I don't want to be too cynical, but it's the thing that allows them to not really clean up their act in terms of how they compensate their workers and how they properly monetize their business, how they properly value their business, how they properly cost their business, and like how much it costs to actually do the work. And that's what leads to the situation of exploitation. and and tipping is like the Band-Aid that goes on top of that says, okay, you could tip more, right? You could do more as a because you're not going to solve this problem. And here's lo and behold, another problem that that the politicians, that the government, that the business bureaus, another problem that nobody can solve but you. Similar to all the other problems that nobody can solve but you. Have you been recycling lately? Have you been walking less and walking more and driving less? Do you take your bike? It's more and more big ticket problems get pushed down to you when the 80% of the 20% that create 80% of the problem. But, wait, what am I gonna do? Hey,
They're
right.
often devils. Do the
Often,
thing that
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm trying to solve world hunger here. Or, like,
way, really.
yeah. I'm
I'm
talking
trying to
about,
solve the world hunger that you are causing.
yeah, you are causing you. And the problem is that there's too many people on the earth. That's the only problem. We got to find some. Yeah, that's the problem. Really, there's just too many people. There's too many people, and I want way too much.
And by the way, that's why I wanted to just talk about tipping. It's like this really small, minuscule kind of thing that like no one really. This is the thing. Why don't we want to talk about it? No one wants to talk about problems anymore, really. And it is a problem that appears for the third culture. I think third culture individual more often than not. They travel more, generally speaking. They're around different places, and um, it's something that seems to arise more often than not. And it's the same thing what you're saying. Where does it start and where does it end? The cab driver who did not get up to move my suitcases into the back, I had to move those. Do I tip him or not? I did all the work. Like the little marginal places that you could have serviced me, you didn't. So do I owe you something now or not?
Yeah, and I think even in that, right? So I could. I'm the driver. So, like, part a part of I think a civil society that I want to be a part of is where people do helpful things for each other without an expectation, at the very least, a monetary expectation in return. So, standing at the example, I'm standing at a traffic light and I'm walking and then there's an old lady and it looks like she's carrying a big bag and I offer to help her and I carry her bag and I carry it across the street so that she can just hustle across the street, or I stop the traffic, I or I do one, two, or three things. I don't want to live in a world where I go, okay, now you can tip me for that. Okay, and then I put my hand out.
Me, please.
Yes, please. I was just trying to help, and I want to live in a world where somebody sees someone that needs help. A mom, she's carrying 3 kids, and she's got this, and she's got that, and she's pregnant, and I wanna live in a world where people get up. Like, people get up and they help, and they notice, right? And I think that's what I want, a kind of world I would wanna live in, and I wanna contribute towards. That's a communal type of world, even as the ardent capitalist that I am. A communal type of world where there isn't necessarily that expectation of there isn't that expectation. Like, of me helping. So if I'm in a position where in a job that I have to help people, uh, I'm not doing it just so that you give me money. And actually, I know in the Middle East and in Saudi, when there are people that are like that won't do anything unless there's something in it for them, like financially, monetarily, they don't last very long.
They're
Like,
sidelined.
yeah, people know that that person is like that, and it's a negative It's a negative connotation. So they go, "Man, this guy's like this." And, "Oh, okay." And then people choose not to work with them. And I think obviously, I say that obviously as a TCK, obviously that you would prefer to have people that help from the goodness of their heart, right? I'm in a position to help you, and if I am in a position to help you, I'm going to help as many people as I possibly can. And even like religiously, like I think even like on a sort of a spiritual level, and I would hope that there's this base is that it's because the more people I help, like I mean, even I know even like Christians and stuff that will have the same type of thing. It's like I'm helping children of God, right? Like you are also a child of God, and so I'm helping you, and by doing that, I am helping God. Like I'm making it good with God by doing this with you, and also I'm doing this so that in the hope that God helps me. So that I do want something back, but I don't need anything from you. What are you gonna give me? $5, $10, $20? Forget that, man. That's not what I want. I want some good stuff. Like,
Sweet, sweet karma.
yeah, exactly. I want some of that good stuff. Don't forget it, man. You keep it. That, and even in that, even though it's selfish, like there is an element of selfishness in your helping. Maybe that's something that you simply cannot escape, right? That is something that's always in there. Yeah.
The thing is, the help you're talking about is, generally speaking, not tied to your work. The reason why this is so interlinked and confusing is because it's a career, it's part of your career income. It's part of the job, but it's also not.
Yes.
And so that's what makes it very, the servers, most of them will tell you, we go out of our way regardless. We will go out of our way to help, whether the tip is coming or not. We're good people. We'll help
Yep.
regardless. But we just like to know what we're going home to in our wallets. Like that
Yes.
same, it's that same
Well,
argument.
and
Can I
that's
just
totally
make,
fair. Like
yeah,
that's
yeah, yeah.
totally
Can I just
fair.
make $12 an hour at a steady rate versus $7 and $10 in tips, so 17
And
in an
not have a
hour, but
living
then
wage,
zero.
but work the same, like work full time and not have enough, and not have enough to have my own place to live in, like to have a place to live, to have food to eat, to have a family, like to
And it's that same thing again. What about the whole ecosystem? The bus boy or bus girl who cleans up the plates and makes sure in their own way they've contributed to your food getting there in some
yeah,
way, shape, or form by keeping the restaurant clean. The janitor has made your food hygienic in some way. Don't they deserve some of that tip then? And there are restaurants that pool
that,
tips and stuff, but those are like, you have to be very well organized and very well managed and be honest to have that system.
yeah, because you
Uh,
got to give somebody the pool, and and there are some like restaurant owners that are just garbage, right? Like you feel like, and you'll see turnovers really high there. It's like they never have
You
the same
remember
person.
ABC, Amy's Baking Company, the one where Gordon Ramsay, the first kitchen nightmare, I think, that he walked out of, he just couldn't work with them anymore.
You couldn't handle
They're
this.
definitely also TCKs. The husband was like a Lebanese American guy, and she was like from there, and it was a disaster of an episode. But they were also like that. They were owners that kept all the tips. All the restaurant servers were telling the documentary that, like, yo, they take all our money. We get our basic minimum wage or less than minimum wage, and that's it.
Yeah, and as soon as you work, and like, these are the kinds of places where, like, when you quit, you give them no notice, and you shouldn't give them notice. Like, fuck them. Like, you don't have to tell them shit. And but again, the debate comes on like not just I think consumer protections, because I think what we're talking about is not just that, but it's also worker protections. Mm, and right, like for some reason this popped into my head. I saw a little thing with Oprah with about Oprah. So Oprah apparently was shitting on Gen Zers. And she was like, you know what the problem is with Gen Zers is that they want success just like that. They don't want to work for it. They don't want to. And uh, there's a cringe factor when it comes from uber billionaires sitting there saying, oh, Gen Zers, they wanted success just like that. They're like, no, they don't. Like, they don't want success. They totally understand that they need work. What they do want, though, is like all that education debt that you told them that all that education debt you put on them. Yeah, remember that lie? The great lie that you did with them. And now, even if you have a job, you get a job and it's paying you decently, you still don't have enough to live in a city, like with dignity. right? Like you still don't have enough to move out of your parents' house. And I thought you said that like they would move out. So please be quiet. Please be
You
quiet.
get
Oh,
just enough to pay your property tax. That's it.
yeah, to pay your taxes and maybe service your debt. And maybe, but not too much because we need that debt to keep growing.
That's the thing, not service your debt, service your, like, interest payment, but not work on the actual
Yeah,
debt.
I
That's
don't. Yeah,
another
we don't.
trick they play
Nobody
with.
wants that to go down. Uh, so I think all of it when we talk on a grand scale about tipping and like tipping culture, and I feel like in society and in cultures where there isn't tipping, it's not like the service is shitty. Like service does not suffer when you remove tipping. And from my experience now in like the Middle East, like in the Middle East and in North America and in Europe, right? I mean, no, Europe, like I'm not sure, I can't remember about the tipping, but in terms of service, the Middle East where it's at, like you go place, like people don't say no, they say yes. How can I help you? What more can I do for you? What more can I do for you? What else do you need? And like even when I'm going to buy something in a store, there's like the salesman is good. Like the salesman is, what do you need? What else can I get you? They end at what else? They don't. Like he's always, please just leave me alone. I don't want to sell anything. Which is how I feel a lot of times when I'm in North America, where maybe at least like salespeople in or what do they call them? Like store, like what you did?
Associates?
Yeah, yeah, which
Associates.
yeah, you're working there. You're not. No one's ever gonna offer you a tip, right? And so you're not like,
And
or
there's a little bit of, yo, this person's out here spending hundreds of dollars and I'm making $10 an
and I
hour.
make yeah.
Like,
So
bro,
yeah, there's that as well. And so you're like, "Oh, sorry, you didn't get the one you wanted?" And you
then
know the other one's down the hall.
in the Gulf, they're happy when you're like, okay, I want $10,000 of this, 20,000 of this. They're like, oh, cool. What next? What next?
Yeah.
Over here, it's like, yo, okay, can you stop spending your money in front of me? Can you go to the other
Could you
store and
please go
stop it?
sign there?
Like,
Yeah. This is disgusting. You should be ashamed. Like,
yeah, yeah. Like, what
like,
would Greta think?
I'm gonna take my phone and record you now and post you on the internet and shame you virally.
We need the cancel mob. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. You're probably also a racist. I don't know, man. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. Tipping, I don't know. It's just weird. It's just weird that, again, it hasn't really been addressed. And Canada's also like America now, where people are wondering what's going on. Is there an answer to this, or they're very confused over there as well?
So where I'm gonna shoot it back. I'm gonna shoot it back to our listener. I want you to like, what do you think? Are we totally off about this? So like we're clearly on the side of you got to be done with this tipping thing. I don't want anybody to judge people because they don't tip enough. And I think that all of that is a sideshow from the actual problem, which is an economic problem and a wage problem and a I think that's where the problems exist. I don't think the problem is that people aren't I think people want to gift. I think they would love to, and I think they just have problems with the expectations of it. At least not third culture kids, but like us in the East and stuff. Like we just have an issue of the expectation, I think. And I think that uh there this is a tough topic, but I think there more and more advocacy and work can be done towards this. I think it's happening. W- Starbucks workers unionize and then see what happens to them. And so I think this is a bigger, more complex issue than just now just start tipping 25% and to stop doing 30%. And then so my question is like, where does it end, Karen? Where does it end?
Do you hear the ice cream machine? The ice cream guy's outside. I just want to say he doesn't get tipped ever. He sells his ice cream.
Yeah.
He goes from every block to block, street to street. He gets his money for the ice cream, and that's it.
And there's this idea, I think, also where there's a like an idea of like risk. is what you get. Like any money that you get, that you earn,
What you were
that comes to
owed
you,
cosmically.
it's not it's not for you. It's not because you did such an amazing job. It's because God has graced you. Because so every buck is grace. And that thought, it makes it very, or believing that, when you believe that, it makes you very grateful for the things that do come your way. Like it's a feeling of, which also makes you a bit more content with whatever it is. And that's part of what I was saying, is that a lot of these things are y- outside of your control. Like the person that's coming, the day that they're having, the day that you're having, the situation most of the time is out of your control. And if your salary or your wage is the up and downs of those things, it would make it very difficult, I think, for you to perform at a high level in your service job, because you're worried about your compensation and what's going to come, and you're trying to get out of it, or trying to get a better job, or trying to do something different, or trying to move. And so it doesn't necessarily reward good work. I think actually even tipping doesn't necessarily reward and improve the service industry. And so that's the claim I'm making. I'm open to changing my mind. I'm spreading it out there. Do you think it's the same? Um, like, not just
Yeah,
you.
yeah, you guys let us know your thoughts about all of this tipping. Is it
Are we totally off? Are we
which
assholes? Are we just
countries do you live in, and do they tip there? Like, what's the tipping etiquette there? Is it like, yeah, are we completely off base here, or have we hit a home run and like we've bullseye kind of thing?
and that wraps up our conversation on tipping etiquette and third culture kid experience. As always, I'd like to thank our listeners for tuning in and being part of the Third Culture Convos community as we continue to explore these unique challenges and opportunities that come with being a TCK. Don't forget to follow us on social media and stay up to date with our latest episodes and join the conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a review and share it with your friends and family. We'll be back next week for another engaging conversation. Until then, keep exploring the beautiful complexities that makes our world so diverse and connected. And this is Waseem
This is Majid.
saying peace, peace.
Yes,